worried about what they're doing. I'm focused on what I need to do well. If we're going to be basing everything that you're doing on someone else, then you're living their dream.
We have Pedro Pereira today. He is the founder, creator, and leader of Fishbone Restaurants, one of my favorite restaurants. So he has over 200 staff that he oversees and has really created an amazing brand. Pedro, super excited to have this conversation with you today.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Being with the business leader mogul as you are, to be invited onto the show is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, we speak with the top entrepreneurs that are out there, and what you've been able to accomplish is phenomenal. So I want to go back to the beginning. And you didn't grow up here in North America. You came from another country completely. And so I want to hear kind of your story and what really set you up to be able to be such a successful business owner and to be able to create something that is truly unique and stands out from amongst the crowd there.
Oh, thanks for that. Yeah, coming to Canada, obviously just a country of immigrants that are looking to work hard and get a better life. Canada was our destination, coming from Portugal, which has everything to offer. But there's a big discrepancy in income versus then a lifestyle, perhaps, right? So we are a country of immigrants that go out there looking for better conditions. So I came to Canada when I was 18. So that was only 2 years ago, right? No, we can't go with that. But so for the last 27 years, it's been, just giving myself a chance and surrounding myself by great people to kind of get into the business world. And your surroundings and the people that you hang out with have a huge role in how far you can take it. So working with business leaders in my industry, in the restaurant industry, was definitely a key factor. Managed restaurants for many years, Toronto, Vancouver, and then just wanted to jump into ownership of my own. And here we are today after now 17 years of ownership.
Wow. So you're 18 years old. You decide you want to move from Portugal, which is known for their amazing food. We actually had a soccer tournament for my son, and we ended up going to Porto, which was like phenomenal. And the food was just great. They have this special dish there called the Francesinha. Yeah. Very unique to Porto, right?
Which translates, it's actually to a little French lady, essentially, right? So Francesinha. So if you gotta love salt if you're gonna have that, because that thing is loaded with flavor and salt on it.
Yeah, it's just like it's a smorgasbord of like it's a sandwich melted with cheese, and then inside it's got everything,
ham and all sorts, and then that gravy on top is it's a little much.
From what I've you either love it or some people not so much, but it's very unique. But so going back to Portugal is really known for its food, and so 18 years old. You move over to, do you move right to Toronto?
I moved right to Toronto. My sister was already living here, so we figured it was easier to essentially establish ourselves, having a household that we could rely on and family and whatnot. My parents came a few months later after me, and I came with obviously the goal of continuing a soccer career because I played in Portugal until that age. And when I got here and got into a semi-pro level, there just wasn't enough money in the sport, funny enough, back in the late 90s. But even playing then with some of the guys, Toronto Supra, practicing there, but having to find the source of income that could sustain myself and support part of the family was about, what do I do here? And so one of my soccer coaches was a server at a restaurant in downtown Toronto. And he's like, okay, I'm going to get you a job because you're not going to make enough money playing. So I'll get you a job at that restaurant. And that's how it started. And with having zero background in the hospitality industry, it became really a means of becoming good at it. And I think my growing up with physically challenged parents to begin with, I was very, very much geared towards wanting to succeed at anything I did, as a way of making up for it.
When you say physically challenged, like what, like how so?
Dad had polio when he was 2, so
Oh
he's
no.
been
Okay.
paralyzed on one side his whole life.
Okay.
And mom was born essentially with a club foot and a much shorter leg than the other. So even nowadays, with age, obviously, it becomes a little more challenging in mobility. But the irony in the whole thing is that they ended up opening sporting goods stores. So physically challenged, but they opened sporting goods stores, which made me then exposed to that world of just the merchandise component and everything about it. And I fell in love with sports. And I think I became very good at any sport that I put my hands on. I was great at it. So I always wanted to be the best, and I always wanted to be the best in a competitive environment. So when I got into the restaurant industry, it was like, wow, okay, I'm learning this, but now I want to be the best at it no matter what. So that was kept driving me to become good at something and learn every single day and become better and better at it.
Yeah, so that's something actually when I was playing in Sweden, it was a very similar. The one year I ended up working a little bit when I was playing semi-pro hockey. And that's something there when you came over, it's interesting. So you came over, you're 18 years old, you have your parents that were they had some challenges there and they see they want their best for their son. So you played semi-pro soccer. So you're over in Canada now and you get a job working in the restaurant. Was that something, did you always have a passion for cooking growing up? Or there was just no, or was that kind of where that passion was really sparked?
I don't think there was a passion. Obviously, at that young age, we don't know what we want.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we have no idea what's going on in life. But I do know my parents were amazing cooks, and the Sunday gatherings, which were pretty grand in the sense of what the offerings were at the table and the love going into that food, made all the difference. And however we all want to look at it, food and drink bring people together to the table, and it's always going to be something that brings family together and friends together, and it all surrounds around that product.
What capped your soccer career? Was it just okay, now we got to start really focusing on building, the restaurant, your career? Like what was the transition point from soccer into your full-time into the restaurant business?
It was literally just again, at 18, 19 years old, you
Yeah.
still have, in going into a pro sport, you can still have another 5, 6 years to make an impact
Mm.
until your mid 20s. Beyond that point, it's going to be that much harder. But it was just that the sport itself in this country had no money behind it. So it was going to be very, very difficult. One of the top players at the time for Toronto Lynx was, making $3,500 a month. And so that's not a ton of money for a pro sport in a country that like Canada.
Yeah, it's not like Messi with the
Right.
Toronto League today, right?
But
Um,
once the TFC was implemented, then
yeah,
obviously there was a massive cash
yeah.
injection into the sport, and that's when soccer really took
Got it.
off.
Okay, so then you're working in the restaurant business. When did it spark to you that and had this vision to create such an amazing restaurant chain? And like what was that? Maybe take us through that initial idea phase to actually implementing and executing on starting your own business.
So I think the thought process in getting into ownership period was just coming off of a bad situation with an employer at the time. You get to a point with your experience, you're going to be able to verbalize a little bit more of what you believe may be a great idea for the business to really take it to the next level. But if someone's going to hold you back just because they're old school and don't want to evolve, that's really their choice as your business. So I decided to take it upon myself to go and like, okay, I got to try this out and do my own thing. So my very first restaurant was actually a takeout model of Portuguese barbecue chicken in Aurora. So that was the very first restaurant for me to go small and really get the feet wet in entrepreneurship before taking on something more long-term as a project. It was just a great way of learning. So I was minimizing the financial mistakes in order to have the bigger impact in the bigger picture long-term for my learnings, right? So being able to be visual and working with employers and understanding what they were doing right and what they were doing wrong, and being a sponge essentially with what's happening around you, gives you a great foundation in understanding within one particular industry what works and what doesn't.
That's so great. So the firing bullet method. So Jim Collins talks a lot about this, about firing a bullet before firing a cannon. Like test it out. The lean startup. It's like minimal viable product. Like build it, get real life feedback from that, and move on. And actually, in our real estate investment firm, our first two investments we did where we raised capital was actually for a co-GP. So I had partnered with two other groups to really see, what they did and how they did it. And it was interesting. I got to learn a lot. And then we built a team around our overall thesis where we take everything now from start to finish. But firing a bullet, were there any key lessons that you learned before executing and getting to that next level? Were there any lessons in that first business that you learned that you were able to implement for later Fishbone?
Yeah, I think so. And for our industry, and I do, it's a massive misconception that the restaurant business is all so glamorous and everyone just like, oh, owning a restaurant is great. You make so much money.
Oh, it seemed Pedro. It seemed so sexy. It's like, yeah, come by my restaurant,
Yeah,
right? And you see
yeah.
Sylvester Stallone in his Rocky movies got his restaurant and it's nice, like definitely has got that appeal. But I mean, it's one of the highest turnover businesses, right?
No
That's
doubt.
out there.
Yeah.
It's one of the toughest. So that you've actually made it's like incredible.
No matter what market, it's going to be very, very difficult. The margins are razor thin. And I think the major lesson with that first restaurant was understanding that it's not always about the product or the service. It's a package deal, but the ability to know your numbers in your own business is crucial. So no matter what it is, I think no matter what industry, and I'm going to emphasize more of obviously on mine, is just knowing your numbers and knowing where there's flexibility, where there isn't, that you need to run your books in the block. That's the whole idea. Otherwise, opening a business or a restaurant in this case, just for the glamour or to say that you own something is kind of pointless. There has to be a goal essentially within that. So I think the financial integrity of the business is massive.
What are I'm curious, what are the main kind of numbers? Like in general, every business, it boils down to like a few numbers that if these numbers are out, it's like as a CEO, you have major red flags going off. Of course, cash and, profit is important, but are there any kind of key metrics that you measure that really will tell you if you're going to have a successful year or not?
Well, to me, obviously, cash flow, and our business is very much built on cash flow because it's a transaction that happens immediately. Obviously, we hold inventory that we need to move. So not over ordering is obviously a big component that you're holding on to it. But the biggest red flag that can happen in the restaurant industry is obviously labor. And that's a massive one that when that 1, 2, 3%, just because things were a little slower and we're weather dependent in Toronto, obviously, massive snowstorm, no one's going out, but our staff are still coming to work. That can fluctuate a little much. So I think that's the number one component within our ledger that can really, really change the numbers, right?
Yeah. So your labor costs.
Definitely labor. Food costs, obviously, you price a menu, you have products. Unless your suppliers are fluctuating too much on their costs, you have it down. Your rent is the same. Everything else tends to be fairly even throughout the year. So labor is actually the one big fluctuation that you may have and has a massive effect on your bottom line.
Okay, so you're running this smaller business, and then what was it that made you transition into building that brand and creating it and launching Fishbone?
Well, considering we were on the outskirts of Toronto when we opened that first restaurant and living outside of Toronto, we just saw a market for those who are living in the 905, as we call it, up here, where you're just on the outskirts of the city that you don't need to go into the downtown to go and have a dining experience. So there's so many out in the bedroom communities that want to be going out. They have the babysitter at home, but they don't want to be driving an hour and a half to go for dinner and then driving an hour and a half back. So we just started to see that there was a captive audience for all this. So we did a little research and what the demographic was in the area. My background was in fine dining restaurants for a number of years in the city, and yes, I was able to cater to a lot of celebrities and movie stars and whatnot throughout all those years. So I was already exposed to that environment of wanting to create an experience. I think that's what triggered me learning, getting the feet wet with the takeout model, and something that spoke very highly to me as my culture and the product that we consume often in Portugal. But then being able to offer an experience in more refined dining setting, right?
Well, and that you did create big time because it's interesting. We eat at a lot of different restaurants, and with Joanna and myself, we traveled quite a bit as well. And it's interesting. We talk a lot about Fishbone and what you've been able to create there, and the quality and the experience as well. So. I'm curious, before you launched, did you have, with business owners, entrepreneurs, some they just kind of start and there's no plan. Others have an idea and they just start executing. Others, what they have this big, massive, 100-page business plan. What did you have before you actually started? Did you have kind of it, really nailed out, or was it something that you really figured out as you went along?
Definitely didn't have anything nailed out. For the first restaurant, the takeout model, definitely I had a business plan and whatnot. It was the first one, so I really wanted to go through the process. Everything else that I've created after that has been essentially a little bit more on the fly and just taking all that experience built into here. And we all know that knowledge doesn't take space. So educating yourself further and further and gathering as much as you can from industry experts and leaders and getting inspiration from colleagues in the industry and whatnot really starts to build your own portfolio in your own head. And having the support from your wife, and I had that, although she's never worked in the industry, but being able to see the vision that's not on paper, but just in conversation, sharing a glass of wine. I think this should work, that should work. Let's design it like this and like that. And just being able to bring it to reality. It's quite the process. And everything that we've built, whether it's conceptualizing the look of the restaurant, the menus, everything is done essentially in here and just done all by us. We don't hire interior designers. I do all the contracting in the spaces, build a lot of the stuff myself, unless it's specialized like plumbing and electrical, but I'll do it. So that whole concept is like, you really got to have a vision and funnel that all into, okay, execution, and being able to come out on the other side and feel like, okay, we've built it. It looks great. Just kind of winging it was, again, it's an experience for me. And then it gets you to learn as opposed to following too much of a guideline, because things change, right? On the go.
It's so interesting. And this is like an underlying trait that I find with most successful business owners. It's not like they took, years or even months to be able to like write out this big, long business proposal like they teach you in school. And the ones that actually do, I find that it's not something that they go back and reference a lot. I think that if it's that complicated, your business, and you have like 100-page business plan, I think that although that could be a good exercise, I think what's more important is your ability to take that 100-page business plan and to like summarize it into 1 or 2 pages, right? Because if it's that complicated, you have to be able to get the business plan and communicate it out to your or your team members, your business. And if it's so complicated, only it, and you're not able to communicate it off the bat, I think that it will slow you up. So
You slow you down, and then you
yeah,
start to overanalyze. And there's nothing worse than trying
yeah.
to make a business decision and you're like overanalyzing everything and the decision isn't getting made. And we as entrepreneurs, I think that's the one trait that no one could take away the value, is being able to make a decision
Mm,
and making it, whether it's wrong or right,
yeah.
you're going to learn from the wrong ones. But when you make the right decision, and it's not by impulse, it just, you got to follow your gut. It was like, I got to make a decision. Let's go.
And act. And it's interesting. You say it's like this urgent attention to like take massive action. And so that's like a key trait as well. It's like you want to know what makes the key underlying determining factor that I found with successful business owners, if you were to summarize it, is the ability to have an idea and take quick action, learn so you don't keep making the same mistake, take action on what it is you learn and get better. But the one that takes action very quickly and gets real live data and then improves on that will get further ahead than somebody that's taking way longer to
Way
plan,
longer. I
right?
agree. Yeah,
Because
and
otherwise you're
just to
guessing.
see you and learning from that experience of making that mistake, and we know that a lot of successful entrepreneurs have failed previously in other businesses, and what's made them successful is just that understanding what they did wrong, so you don't make the same mistake again. And again, relying on people that you can trust within the industry. Go and ask for someone for an hour of their time and pick their brain to then go ahead and make that decision fully supported, right? Not
Yeah.
making the decision is definitely the biggest business kill, in my opinion,
Mm,
and not just going out there and try it. What's
yeah.
the worst that can happen?
Yeah. So there's almost like there needs to be this like this risk aversion, as in like you have to be okay with a little bit of failure because failure is what gives you real feedback. And so you see, it's interesting. Successful people, they see failure differently than others that just don't take action, right? Failure is feedback. That's good. And from what I've seen, well, not only experiencing the restaurants, but even having the conversations you and I have had, your ability to hold high standards is something that's really evident as a customer experiencing your restaurant. And so I'm curious there, like how do you hold people accountable to that vision that you have? You have over 200 people. The service is excellent, and so experience providing a great experience is important for you. You had mentioned. How do you hold people to such high standards for so long, and to be able to communicate your vision to them so that they uphold it?
I think the one thing that my message is pretty clear to all my staff is that they need to be able to put themselves in the guest's shoes. First and foremost, sit at the table. What do you see? What do you hear? How are you being approached by a server? Whether it's management, no matter who it is, I want them to see themselves as the guest somewhere else, what their expectations of that business is. And therefore, you got to deliver that standard that you're expecting. So, and beyond whatever they come on board and whatever standards or expectations they have, I need to be able to raise that expectation for them personally as a person, never mind just working for our company, is that they should expect more themselves and should have a higher standard and keep building on it. And that's how we want to just flip that and like, okay, if you were to be sitting at that table, how are you going to react to this situation that just happened? Right? How do we correct that? It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want that to happen to me. Right. So we have to see what they're seeing right now and what they're experiencing it and mitigate any of those errors for the experience to be a little more wholesome, right?
And is this as something, is that like a regular cadence meeting? Like, is there any sort of like huddles or like weekly meetings? Like, again, because I found in the past with a lot of business owners, they say something once and then it's just, it's hard for people to implement because they forget, right? So how are you able to communicate that so they actually perform it on a regular basis? What's your communication cadence on that, or your managers? How would you
I
keep them
actually
top
make
of
the
mind?
joke to them all the time. Sorry, guys, I hate to be a pain, but here I go again. And it's reiterating the same thing over and over.
Okay.
It's like a constant reminder.
Mm,
Guys, yesterday we were great because you're only as good as your last performance. What happened yesterday? That's not good enough. Let's get back on the field, perform back to our levels. Because if we had a bad day yesterday, today, we're just as bad until we prove that we are better. And it's a constant reiteration of just that raising the bar, and having the team that can actually see the philosophy and understand what's meant to be delivered. And Carlo is one of my right hand guys, and just the way he embraces what I like to call hospitality 101, which is literally about feeling like someone is just very welcome into my own home. And so if I don't want you in my home, I'm not going to give you the experience that you want, or you're not going to feel welcomed. And that's the whole idea. You come into our restaurants, that's the focus, is to feel like you're coming to my own house as my guest, and I want to make sure that you're well looked after.
love
And
that.
that's tough.
It's very tough. It's very, very tough. I think, Business owners, I think they don't realize how many times something needs to be repeated for it to stick. And so for me, if we don't say it at least 8 times, then that's not something that we really expect them to
Yeah.
remember,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's got to be like over, and it's got to be coming from a place that they know you're not just joking or just saying something, off the cuff. It's like, no, these are our standards. So many times, like 8+ times before you expect them to do it, and then it's got to be an ongoing drip from the leaders, right?
And I have a lot of staff that have been with me for 6, 7, 8 years that are still with us. And regardless of how long, they know that I'm going to keep pushing them to just become better version of themselves, whether it's within the business or outside the business, so that they can continuously grow and understand where I'm coming from. Because the idea is to give them a formula that if they were to move on and open their own business or be an entrepreneur, that they've taken the foundation that has worked for us and take it from there on their own. And we've had a few chefs in the last 2 years that have gone on to open their own restaurants. And that to me is a proud moment, because like, oh, they can go and do it. And they've taken the learning and understood that it wasn't me being difficult about, guys, this is how it needs to happen. This is how it needs to happen. It's like, now we get it. That's why. There's a reason for it all, right?
It's so interesting how there's themes. There's you might have read it, The Unreasonable Hospitality. It reminds me a lot from
Favorite
Wilbur.
book.
Yeah, you have a similar mindset, Hospitality 101. These high standards, so good.
It was interesting, and it's not, that was already the model in what Will wrote in that book is definitely at a whole other level. Obviously 11 Madison Park is a whole other ballgame from what we do, but in understanding how you can change a guest's experience, a guest's day. They were having a bad day, they come into that restaurant, they sit at the table, and you can change their day for the better and have such an impact on people, right? And that's powerful.
I love that. With us on the real estate brokerage side and even on the investment firm side, it's interesting how you were saying earlier about how you train your staff to see things from their point of view. One of the things that we talk about a lot is you have no idea what happened to them that day. They could have had a family member that was just told that they could have found out that they had some sort of, sickness, or yeah, somebody died. So even if they're yelling at you, it's not you personally they're upset with. It's the situation. And a lot of times that context, understanding that if something might have happened to them, and I'm going to love them, no matter what. And so that context there, seeing it from their point of view and what potentially the situation they could be in, I think takes a lot of the sting out of those hard situations.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard position to be in. Obviously, we're dealing with a large number of public, and we don't know what's happened to them in the day. So it's always reiterating to my staff, don't take it personally. Whatever the guest is experiencing is something that has to do with them. You're here to make their day better and provide a service and make them feel like, okay, I'm being looked after for the next 2.5 hours I'm here. Someone's looking after me and they're doing a great job at it. So that has to be our focus when the guest comes through the door, right?
Interesting. There's another kind of theme here that I'm seeing, and I'll share just super quick story. I was speaking with one of my friends. He's super successful business guy and has a lot of a big following. And he said to me one time, he's like, Mark, maybe, because he was talking about he was having some challenges with staff and they just weren't upholding the standards. He's like, maybe I should lower my standards a little bit. And it was interesting statement because, super successful. And I just said to him, I said, that is the reason why you're successful, is because you have that high standard. It's like that's high standards what made you successful. And so it's about finding people that will align with that. And a lot of times it's just the consistency in the message and that almost like that bullheaded, determination to just keep going at it. So like entrepreneurs, like you see Pedro, what he's done, he's had to hold this high standard for such a period of time. And then it's not like a one and done. It is consistently ongoing over and over and over, repeating the message until, like you had said, Pedro, it's like, I know you're going to hear it from me again, but you say it anyways, because you know how important it is.
And a friend of mine actually gave me a different view on the whole scenario when it comes to staff, and he's very well to do as well. But the line that he gave me back probably about a decade ago, and that stuck with me, it was very simple, and it speaks truly to, I think, any business. And when you feel disappointed to a degree with either a team member or a staff member, it's not like they're doing it on purpose to disappoint you. Is that your expectations of them are just that much higher. And so making them see is like, I know that you're capable of so much better. So how do we get you there? So I know you're not purposely just dropping the ball. But okay, let me guide you to get there. And then I know you're going to match where I expect you to be. And that's tough. They're like, okay, and especially when you have 200 of them, they're like, okay. There's a lot of micromanaging in that aspect of dealing with everyone's personalities, number one, and how do I get them to that next level? Because it's not a blanket statement for everyone, right? It's not like, this formula works for all the staff. No.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to take the information differently. So you really got to be kind of like flowing with everyone.
I love that. And, it's so rare, that perspective of coming from a place of, it's a book it's a principle out of How to Win Friends and Influence People, of giving the other person a fine reputation to live up to. It's like, you are capable of this. And right now you're here. It's like, how can we get you to live to your potential? And like that message, it's like a hopeful message. And I think with most people, they never hear that from others. So that is very attractive when their leader, in this case, yourself, is saying, listen, you're capable of here. And that is such an inspiring way to go about building and growing people. It's like, for us and our boys, I'm like, consistently, I'm like, you're going to do something special. You're going to help a lot of people. It's like this message that, they get in trouble at school, and, it's an ongoing theme. It's easy for them to get negative thoughts. It's like, listen, your brain is super active, and that's meant for a reason. You're going to do something, more and bigger. And I think that approach, when you're overseeing your team members, is genius.
But it's important also to as an entrepreneur, that you're obviously investing a lot of time in building a team and making everyone grow with you. Once in a while, you'll find the one person that is way too much in the comfort zone, and you're going to want to push and push, but it gets to a point that it can't just be you driving, and you need that person to want to be a part of it and want to grow for their own selves. So there has to be a lot of willingness for self-growth. And when they don't have it, then you start to question, like, okay, how much can I continue to invest in that? So, and hopefully that it's few and far in between, because if you, as a leader, if you can really get everyone on the same boat as you, and like, okay, we're all going to row in the same direction. When someone is constantly trying to row in a different, they're like, okay, that's fine. We have to cut it loose here, right? Just so you don't hold the rest of the team back, because that's just it. It's like a sports analogy, right? Well, you have one player that's not performing, everyone else is like, okay, we're going to trade him. That's what it's going to come down to sometimes. It's a tough choice, but it's the reality of what business is all about.
Pedro, it's becoming more and more clear to me why top talent is attracted to you. Carlo, you had mentioned earlier, one of your right-hand guys, I would say he'd be one or two of the top managers that I've ever experienced. He always makes me feel special, and just a solid guy, but super talented. And so you shared some really good reasons why top talent is attracted to be working with you. What are some other things that you do to attract this top talent to you as like a magnet? Is there anything that you do that do you think forms as part of that reasoning why people want to come work with you?
Well, for us, it's a lot more challenging in order to get, because we can retain very well. It's the getting, because we're in the suburbs of the big cities. So transportation obviously has become a big component of it. A lot of that talent has indeed moved to the outskirts of the city. So they don't want to commute back into the city, especially in this industry, which obviously there are late nights and whatnot. We've created a little bit more of the balance with our business hours and whatnot. So we are not in the kitchen until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. We've created a schedule. We feel like, well, our revenue between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. is this. Why even be open? Guys, okay, 9 o'clock, by 10:30, 11, everyone's on their way home. And that for the industry in itself is an anomaly. It doesn't usually happen. So I think it's just from my experience in the past as an employee is taking that understanding of what do I want for my staff? What kind of work-life balance do I want to create? Now, do we have moments that it's push and it's hard? Yes, because when it gets going, it gets going. But then say, okay, guys, things are just tapering off. Let's start to take the foot off the gas and you guys can go and enjoy a little bit more, take some extra time off. So there has to be flexibility. But it's a give and take relationship. And this can be a great relationship or a really bad divorce, right? So that's what it comes down to. Like, we're all here for the same goal. Let's do it.
That's a good example of you seeing things from their point of view and to be able to structure things that actually makes a lot of sense for the business and for them. But you're considering what it's like being in their shoes, which is definitely attractive.
Because I've played every single role essentially of all those who are on the team. So I know, I see a lot of restaurant owners like, okay, they're great front of house people, but they've never really cooked in a kitchen. So they don't truly know the experience of what it's like to be in a 100-degree kitchen, right?
Yeah.
And then on the flip side is like some chefs can be owners and business leaders, but they've never experienced what it's like dealing with the public on a daily basis.
Got it.
So having that form of understanding like what our staff is dealing with on a daily basis gives us more flexibility to then make the decisions that puts everyone in a comfort zone, right?
Yeah, and more empathy for sure that they understand. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, how about any regular habits or maybe routines that boost your productivity? Is there anything you do on a daily basis that is a big determinant or has helped you be successful as a business owner?
Yes, work every single day, work. Because fact of the matter is nothing comes easy. And I think a lot of successful entrepreneurs definitely have their things, getting to the gym at 5 a.m., whatever it may be. I don't have any of that. I think my focus is, family. My family comes first and foremost. That's always my focus, is getting up, seeing that my kids are healthy, everyone's good. Okay, it's already a good day. From here on, nothing's going to fall from the sky. So let's go out there and go get it. And that has to be the mentality. Once you lose the momentum, then everything can start to get a little loosey-loosey. And I think just having the drive of constantly going is important to me. But yes, we all need a break mentally and physically. We need to kind of retract a little bit, get to recharge. I love being on the golf course, love playing golf. And I think that's my way of just pulling away from it and just like, okay, for 4 hours, leave me alone. Let me kind of restructure everything in my head, come off the golf course, like, okay, I know what I need to go and do now, right? I'm not an early riser. We're restaurant people, so we're night owls. So we'll be having a glass of wine until 1 o'clock in the morning and then going to bed, which means we're getting up at 8 or 9 in the morning. So it's total opposite schedules from everyone, right? So nothing in particular that gives me that, but staying on top of educating and learning, I think, is a big component to keep wanting more and more and more. Because that just opens up more and more doors with making decisions for the business, to making the business better. So that's kind of how I keep myself going, right?
Got it. So yeah, actually getting up and doing actual work, recharging, making sure you're getting the recharge time so that you can really execute with intention. Is also a big
and
one.
Research. I got to go out and dine out at a lot of restaurants. I got to be inspired by my peers, right? So like being in those environments is triggering. So I get inspired by everyone in the industry, like not one in particular. It's that everyone has their own identity within this industry, and it's so amazing, right?
Yeah, that market research is so important that you're not like locked up in an office way up in a tower building, but you're never out talking with the actual clients that are enjoying your service or product, right? And so that's where you had mentioned that by going, say, in different restaurants, you're constantly scouting out and getting ideas to be able to, pull in key lessons,
and
right?
It's not about copying them in any way. That's not what you want is the inspiration of, I could be inspired by a sunset in Portugal by the ocean and feel like a dish all of a sudden just comes to my mind, oh, I want to do this. So the environment out there just triggers certain things.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's where it's interesting that you take different ideas, but then you can put spins and make it your own,
Your own. Yeah.
right? And so that's really powerful.
Because
Can
no
you
one's reinventing the wheel.
Oh,
That's a
that's
fact,
it, and
right?
that's what I've learned is that any new idea is they're spin-offs of other ideas,
Of other
right?
ideas. Yeah.
And so even now, like we have, direct competitors that take an exactly like word for word, the exact same. And you know what? At this point here now, I've taken it like, you know what? That's actually a compliment, and it's actually good because it forces us to consistently, innovate and to continue to get better,
Reinvent yourself
right?
from time to time
Yeah.
within our industry, whether it's renovating the restaurant every 5 years, what doing touches, changing the plateware. So there's always something that
Yeah.
we have to, and like you said, it's definitely a compliment when you see someone else.
Yeah.
Because I've seen one of my dishes throughout many restaurants. I'm like, I was doing this 12 years ago, and now it's become a trend in the last 3 or 4. And some of my staff that have moved on have now put those dishes on. I'm like, okay, I guess it's flattery, so
It's
that's the way you got
working.
to take it. And I'll gotta come up with something new, I guess.
Yeah. No, exactly. So can you tell us maybe a challenge or failure that you've had in the past and how you were able to basically work your way through that and kind of maybe a lesson learned from it?
I partnerships. It's a tough one. It's a hard, definitely a hard one to navigate through. Obviously, you have different personalities. We had a restaurant in Laguna Beach, California, which was had some partners involved that were already a restaurant group down there, and that went sour pretty fast. So just navigating through the process of partnerships is it's important. So there has to be like a dating phase. Is it going to be a proposal? Are you going to get married? And just going back to the other analogy, it can be a nasty divorce if it doesn't work out. So understanding who you're getting into business with is very, very important. Are the philosophies aligned? The financial possibilities and commitments, are they aligned? So making sure that everyone's on the same page is crucial, where you don't feel like you're giving, are you investing 75% of your time into the business and the other partner is 50%, but they're only putting 25? Do you feel like, is everyone pulling the same weight? So it's that was one that we learned, and that's why we don't have partners. We don't have investors. Everything has been funded by my wife and myself. We did have a partner back in the day with the second location for a short period of time, who is doing very well in real estate nowadays. And he was an old colleague of mine, and he was fantastic to deal with. But the vision of Fishbone was essentially mine, and I needed to push it the way I needed to push it. So no bad blood there, and now he was great. But then the other side, like I mentioned, California was definitely one to learn from, especially being abroad, which makes things a little more challenging, right?
I like your idea about the dating phase. Is there anything else that you'd recommend to the entrepreneurs that are watching this that I'm about to go into a partnership? What can I do to make sure that this is going to be, this is going to work out for both of us? Is there anything else that you'd recommend they do?
I think it's important for them to study essentially the resume first and foremost. Where have they been? What have they done? What are the results that have been achieved by that person within that particular industry? Bringing in a partner sometimes just for the money's sake, sometimes is deters from your vision as a business, what it can be. If it's just strictly for financial assistance in getting the business going, then establish the parameters properly. And are they voting shares? Or like, how is it structured within the company? Do you have a say in the day-to-day operation, or just let me ride with it? And then, yes, we can come to terms at the end of the year to cut out checks if there's dividends to go out. But I think understanding what do they bring to the table and do things align?
These questions you're asking are so good, and it's so good for entrepreneurs to know going into a partnership that they're good questions to ask and they're not offside. It reminds me a lot of when I got married to Joanna, where I got engaged. And so it was interesting because we only dated for a week. And so it was an interesting story. We met, we had gone out with kind of different friends, as kind of groups a few times, but then we went on, basically we were at ice cream, going for ice cream with the group, and then everybody took off as the two of us sitting there, and we started talking about, our faith. We're both Christians. We believe in Jesus Christ. We were talking about kids. We were talking about like our future vision, and we got so deep so quickly. And so by the end of that week, it was like clear to me without any sort of question, like, you're the one I want to marry. And it reminds me of, The Bachelor and the Bachelorette. They're so surface, right? But the reason I'm sharing this is because getting into a partnership is like a marriage, right? And in some cases, it could actually go a lot longer because if you want a divorce, sometimes you can't. You got to like ride it out sometimes. And so asking these questions deep at the beginning is something that's really good to go through and at least to see how they respond to those questions, to just have the open dialogue at the beginning. And if you're seeing some resistance or, they're offended about a question, uh, that's a big red flag, I'd say, going into a partnership.
And I'm sure there's other components of that process and understanding where they're going, what they want to do and whatnot. There's things that you're going to compromise. In business, there has to be a little bit of a compromise. What's in the gray area that we can then see where it's going to go? But I think there's fundamentals that are black on white that, whether you're going to run the business with integrity, that, there's morals, there's ethics, there's all that. And like, I'm a man of principle with running my business and I want things done by the book. Well, if someone wants to be shady in business operation, like this is not the right partnership, right? So some things you're going to have to compromise, just like a good marriage, like the dating period. Do you want to have kids? Like, I don't know yet. Okay, so let's figure this out a little bit later. But you start to understand if they say flat out no, and you're like, but I do. Okay, there's a red flag. So I think the whole component of it's like a job interview, but it is phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 constantly with who you're considering as a business partner is going to be crucial.
Yeah, that's great. Great information and great advice for 100%. What investing advice would you give a young entrepreneur? So, the entrepreneur, they start their own business, they start to do really well. They're making, quite a bit of excess profit. And, they're looking at what can they do to be able to grow their wealth, outside the business. Is there any sort of overall general investing advice that you would give?
I think diversifying, number one, in my opinion. Obviously, I've built my business on leveraging my business, which becomes let's reinvest and open another location. Let's reinvest and open another location, and not necessarily get out of the industry as with a safety net, perhaps on the other side. So I've known a lot of people in this industry that have failed, unfortunately, financially, because they didn't prepare themselves for what may happen later on. COVID was a very good example within the industry that it wiped out a lot of operators out there that weren't necessarily financially stable enough to sustain what happened, which wasn't pretty for anyone. At the same time, it wiped out a lot of bad operators, which, whether taking advantage of staff and whatnot, they're just probably shouldn't be in the industry altogether. But being able to, number one, understand that your business needs to go into the black and then be able to diversify a little bit more, because you never know what your industry is going to do. It could be real estate, it could crash, it could be restaurants. Restaurants in this case, they're the number one. Let's hold back because the economy isn't great. Well, dining out is a luxury. So the restaurants are the first to like, we can't dine out this week. My guests would used to come twice a week. Now they come once a week. So people start to hold back. So depending on the industry that you're in, and is it recession proof? Is it proof everything? Essentially, then they can rely on it a little bit more. But if there is some sort of vulnerability, have a little more diversification, whether it's the real estate side. Just be comfortable with it. I think using obviously caution and be intuitive in whether it is a good investment or not. Seek advice from someone experienced in something that you want to be able to invest in. Again, trying to get 15 minutes off of someone's time can save you a life sentence, right?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. So diversifying and then getting wise counsel of somebody that's proven themselves in whatever it is that you're looking to invest in.
I've been lucky with that because I see even my circle of friends, I think 90% of my friends are 15 years older than me.
Mm,
So surrounding myself by the wise owls that are like, okay,
yeah.
Pedro, you gotta think if you oh that's your plan, think about it this way. I'm like, okay, thank you very much. And be able to surround with people that have proven themselves, number one, because listening to opinions, that's easy, but from people that haven't necessarily been there or done that is like getting marriage advice from someone that's never been married, right? So being surrounded by good people is crucial when it comes to this.
Powerful principle, 100%. Pedro, what are you excited about right now?
To be honest, in terms of business, I think there's a reset coming for the industry once again in our country. I think it's been a worldwide shortage within our industry as a whole, but I think there's going to be a little bit of a reset in how things are being done efficiently. The labor market obviously there's a massive shortage, but it's getting us to reinvent the model. And COVID did that very, very well, where staff being underpaid and whatnot. So I'm starting to see the industry shaping into more or less what it should be, is having living wages, not taking advantage in hours. And I think that side of the industry now excites me, seeing that there's a better outcome down the road. As an investor, I'm looking forward to getting more into the real estate market and starting to play a lot more with that nowadays. And that's again the diversifying a little bit more. And it excites me. I love a good project. I love getting my hands dirty, going in there and building. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a little bit more of that right now.
That's great. Yeah. And so you had mentioned a little bit of a reset. Can you talk a little bit more about that? As I know some of the listeners would be kind of curious as to what your thoughts are when you like, what do you see coming down over the horizon, and how that could affect other entrepreneurs?
Well, I think we need to understand, opening a business. There's so many hurdles now in Canada, and we start talking about increase in capital gains and whatnot, and those transactions, they're just coming down hard on businesses for as much as this province and this country has been. We're open for business. Well, it's been a little more challenging, obviously, in having that drive. Like, I want to open a business in Canada. This isn't the 60s or 70s Canada, 80s Canada that we had at one point. But I think coming as a correction, I find that the market's been very speculative. There's so many companies that have built so much wealth just based on speculation, but haven't really delivered all that much. So I'd be more weary of those scenarios. Obviously, taking our time to do our research into a lot of the businesses that we want to invest in. It's volatile to a degree. We don't know if there is going to be a bubble. We don't know if it will burst at some point. For the industry itself, in the restaurant industry, I think food prices are obviously still a concern up here north of the border, right? And I think the implications of the politics and how that really, really can change what the scenario is overnight, essentially. It's huge.
One consistent thing's going to be, to me, the results of everything coming down the road is everything is going to be determined. Like, your success will be still up to you. In any market, you can do well as an entrepreneur in any single market. That I'm confident in. So, that's where it's like doubling down on what you believe in and going after it 100% is something that should be like the main focus there as well, right? So that's like a hopeful message as well for the listeners.
I get that question all the time within the industry. Is like, oh, the competition, and my focus is like, I'm not worried about what they're doing. I'm focused on what I need to do well. If I do that well, then the results will come. So if we're going to be basing everything that you're doing on someone else, then you're living their dream, or you focus on what you're supposed to do and get those results, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. You ready for the rapid fire part? And I could keep on going with this interview because I got there's a number of other things I want, but I want to respect our listeners here as well. But yeah, you ready for this rapid fire?
Rapid fire. Okay, this
Yeah.
pressure is on. Let's do
Yeah.
this.
Let's do it. All right. So, which book has made the biggest impact in your business or just your overall life in general?
Definitely Unreasonable Hospitality,
Very cool.
because it really spoke to my vision, and I even read in reading it. It was very quick to take some parts of that book and sending it to my staff. I'm like, everything that I've been saying to you right here, see it. Someone else is doing it as well. The whole walking into a restaurant, and the first three things that I do in my restaurant: temperature, the lights, and the volume on the music is like what changes the experience, right? So see, someone else is doing it. So that's been when I read it, it was like, wow, okay, someone else understands what I deal with on a daily basis.
Oh, that's so good. Because you said music, you said
So yeah,
lighting and temperature.
volume and music, temperature and lighting
Yeah,
are
so
crucial.
that's so true. It's so interesting out of the restaurants that those would create a not a great experience.
Can you
So
imagine you go and sit down at a restaurant, but the volume is so low that you feel like, okay, I
yeah,
don't know what's happening.
yeah.
But if the volume is right and the setting is right, there's like, wow, I feel like a cocktail now. I feel like
Oh,
it changes the whole mood. Or if
yeah,
the dining room is cold and you're like, wow, it's freezing in here. Can we just eat and go? Or
yeah.
like everything changes with those three elements.
No, I love that detailed focus. And so that's Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara there for the listeners. That's great. It's a yellow book, totally phenomenal
I actually bought
read.
it for all my management for
Oh,
Christmas so they could
smart.
all actually read it,
Yeah.
right?
And that's great for all customer service. Like we tie a lot of those ideas into our business as well. So, okay. So next question is if any of your team members or family were to describe you in three words, three different words, what three words would they use to describe you, Pedro?
Ooh, tenacious, stubborn. No, not so stubborn. But I think I am what I do, and the whole hospitality component is really who I am. I want to essentially have everyone around at my house. I entertain a lot, so it's the loving, fun, and just driven individual that I am.
Yeah, loving, fun, driven, tenacious. And you know what? I see stubborn as a business owner as a major trait. It's a different word almost though. It's like there's like that commitment to excellence, right? This like you're
It's not an
determined.
argumentative stubborn. It's definitely a no. I'm stubborn because I want the result, and you need to get to it.
Yeah, you're determined and you know what? You're persistent to get that. And I think that's actually a key trait as well. So very good. And then last question here. What advice would you give your younger self if you were to give any advice about anything?
I think, yeah, being careful with who's around you. I really think that as you're growing into young adulthood and really start to shape your own mind um, with where you want to go in life, whether it's business or whatnot, everyone's opinionated that it can change essentially your path, and you don't want someone else to really implicate or shape it too much for you. Everyone, is going to have an opinion. Don't listen to the noise. Stick to what you really believe in and go for it. Because that noise is just distracting and you don't need it. Like I said, seek guidance if you need to, but my younger self was probably listening to too much of who, what, and what I should do. Like, no. And I think that would be the thing. Like, remove yourself from that. You know who your friends are. You know who you can rely on, and stick to those, and just have your own path. Stick to it, right? If you have a good plan and you really feel you believe in it, you got to go for it.
Yeah, so good. Seek great people around you and then just forget about the noise and stay focused on your
Noise happens all the
mission.
time, especially in a successful kind of environment, right? You're like,
Yeah.
everyone's always out there to try to knock you down or some sort of like, you
Yeah.
know what? Just noise. Just
Yeah.
don't pay
Just
attention.
just noise, keep on moving.
Keep
Excellent,
on
right?
moving.
Yeah, Pedro, this is phenomenal. If the listeners want to, I guess, find out a little bit more about you, I guess your restaurant. So you have Friday Harbor in Innisfil. You have one in Stouffville in Aurora.
So yeah, we just closed the sale on Marine Room Gastropub yesterday. So that one, again, is just another way of creating income within the industry itself. It's not just about opening restaurants and running them. There can be another process that we can make a go at and actually make an income out of it. But yeah, visiting those 3 restaurants, seeing me on Instagram, just shoot me a message, whatever it may be. If you need consulting within restaurants, we do. So we can do all sorts.
Perfect. So Instagram, you can check him out, Pedro.
Chef Pedro Pereira. Yeah.
Perfect. No, that's great. Well, this is phenomenal conversation. Really thankful here, Pedro, for taking
No,
some
I
time
thank
out
you.
speaking with our listeners here. And well, until next time, Pedro, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.
I appreciate the time. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in to the Mark Faris Experience, where we interview the top business owners, entrepreneurs out there to take their key lessons, how they scaled and grew their companies. Want to really invite you back to our next session where we talk with these high producing individuals and learn those key lessons. Until next time, have a great night.